Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and as I'm sure you all know, the second Explorer Anthology is due to arrive on our digital doorsteps on December 13th, just in time for the holidays. And with a purchase price of 4,000 gems or 25,000 gold, that is a big chunk of our arena economy and budget. So the question remains, is it worth it? Is this something we should be buying? And if so, what is the best way to go about it? In other words, let's do a little budget perspective. Before we get into all that, take just a second and smash the like button. Truly, it'll only take a moment to do all of those YouTube things, and it really helps the community. Speaking of community, if you haven't been seeing our community updates, take a moment, tap the bell icon, and update your notification settings. There's a lot of great information, and your voice can help shape the future of the channel. Now, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, right. All right, so as I said, 4,000 gems or 25,000 gold is a big chunk of our budget arena free-to-play expectations here. At 25,000 gold, of course, that's 25 packs or 5 quick drafts. And that means even with the Brothers War having a option of a second rare or mythic in the pack, and the recently added golden packs incentive on the purchase of Brothers War packs, we would still expect to get approximately 50 rares or mythics for 25,000 gold. And the good news is that you actually get that. Of the 25 cards, 14 of them are rares or mythics, and the purchase of the anthology gives you 4 copies of each. So that is 56 rares and mythics guaranteed. And of course, speaking of guaranteed, everyone gets a full playset, so to speak, of wastes added to their collection, the new basic land. And of course, that is a big boon for everyone. No wild cards required, no purchase required. This, of course, also will contribute to the development of Domain as an archetype in both Explorer and possibly more importantly, Historic, because all of these cards will be legal in Historic, not just Explorer. Because, well, virtually everything is legal in Historic. You've got to do some very, very bad things to be banned or restricted in Historic. And by that, of course, I'm mostly looking at Wynota. So, of course, that begs the question, how good are these cards? How much play will they actually see? And I would like to start the conversation by saying that most of these cards, almost universally, are worth a one-of consideration to add to your Brawl repertoire. So that has been said. There are some very specific cases that I will point that out again, but almost any of these cards are worth having at least one of, because of course you can craft these cards with one or more wild cards. You don't just have to go all or nothing on the set. Let's start off the conversation with white. Of the 5 white cards that were offered, all but Eerie Interlude see a good bit of play in Pioneer and really make some nice additions here. I think the all-star that everyone is most interested in is Brave the Elements. Soldier of the Pantheon also is a nice addition for those mono white soldier decks that everyone is kind of building right now when it comes to standard. And of course, Ethereal Armor fits oh so nicely into that green white Enchantress deck. plus also some black-white Aura Matters builds that we see in Pioneer from time to time. Blue gets a much smaller inclusion of cards, but Clever Impersonator at Mythic as well as Dispel at only a common. Both of these cards are very good additions to Explorer as we move towards a Pioneer-esque format. Each of these cards is used fairly heavily in at least half a dozen different builds. Again, both very good additions. Of course, the mono black cards makes blue look pretty generous, but Zulaport Cutthroat at uncommon definitely continues the trend of the various Rakdos Sacrifice and Mardu Sacrifice Matters decks being very budget friendly. This is yet another uncommon that we can put in. And with just a small amount of research, I was able to find 12 or so different lists running this card. So if you're into that style of deck, this is definitely something to keep an eye on. It is also both a human and a rogue. And although this is less relevant, an ally as well. I would love to see something come around to make allies relevant, but so far it's more of a footnote than anything else. At the time of recording, the most played and successful deck in Explorer is, of course, mono red. In its three primary archetypes, you can find fine examples of red deck wins, the creature-based red rush strategy, as well as mono red burn. And for those mono red players, this is a lot like Christmas. The Great Revel, Fiery Impulse, and Rending Volley are all going to find slots in at least one of those archetypes, if not multiples. This is definitely a heyday, and at a rare, an uncommon, and a common, this won't put too much hit on your wildcard demands. And our final singular color is also nothing to sneeze at here. Green got tools for the Enchantress deck, as well as Nylie's Presence for those domain decks as a common cheat towards getting a full domain. Satyr Wayfinder is a nice bit of card selection for green, and Worldbreaker not only has a nice beefy body going on, as one would expect with green, but also has a nice bit of removal for the commonly expected artifacts and enchantments that you would normally see removal for in green, but as well as the ability to exile a land. You can also sacrifice a land and return it from your graveyard to your hand to do it all over again. Fairly good stuff here for green. I think any of these would be good additions, particularly, as I said, if you're looking for that enchantment or domain build. Now, we've only got 3 multicolored cards here to talk about. Reflector Mage is the one that everybody went nuts for ever since day one of the previews a little over a week ago. Not only is blue-white control rejoicing on that, but also the Bant players. There are a lot of Bant human decks that are definitely looking to pick this up. Shaman of the Pack, everybody loves running elves. This is definitely a card that sees a good bit of play in Pioneer. But honestly, it leaves me questioning if mono green elves just really isn't overall better. I think this Golgari elves is more of a mid-range deck, and well, maybe that has a fair point. It might be worth exploring, particularly at only an uncommon. Sliver Hive Lord is really what I would call kind of the first dud of this anthology, at least from a approaching Pioneer standpoint. At the time that I recorded this, I couldn't find anyone running a notable Sliver Hive Lord deck in Pioneer at all. And even the kind of fun Timmy-based cards and decks featuring slivers miss some key components from the current arena offerings. So I think this is more of a speculative card, more so than any other we've talked about so far. All right, now I know we had a couple of Eldrazi earlier that had specific color identities, but we have three very specific ones here in the colorless section. And I wanted to take just a moment and talk about how those interact with something like a commander. These do not violate commander, as a colorless mana is not a color itself, but the absence of all the other colors. So long story short is these can go in any commander deck of any color without any violation whatsoever. The trick to these are, since they do require a true colorless mana to cast it, not just a non-specifically colored mana, you are going to have to run some wastes in order to run these. Good thing everybody got these. I do think all of these are worth considering for those brawl impacts. And really at 2 rares and a mythic, they have some strong considerations here. Obviously, Eldrazi is not an archetype that we're really seeing on Arena at this point, but that is certainly bound to change. Keep your eye out for these. And we started the card conversation by talking about a land, and we're going to finish the card conversations by talking about lands here. Mana Confluence is one of those fantastic lands that I really think everyone should consider, not only for a brawl perspective to have a single copy, but maybe multiples. It is such a good early investment land as you're trying to break into the Eternal formats on Arena, because this single card can fit into any combination of mana. It goes in potentially every 2 or more color deck that you ever build for the rest of your life, until you get maybe some of those more desirable pain lands or shock lands or things like that. So this is a great place to start. I really think everybody needs at least one copy on this. And depending upon where you are in your Arena career and your relationship with the Eternal formats, this might be a very solid argument for a 4-up. Mutavault is everybody's best friend. He is literally a goblin, an elf, a soldier, a spirit, and any other creature type he could possibly be, because he's a land well, most of the time, in fact, he is virtually immune to things like wrath effects, which are just so prominent from blue-white control. I think this is the most solid argument of all the cards on the list as an easy 4-up for your collection, and I really think if you play any sort of tribal build anywhere ever in the Eternal formats, that this is the easiest one of wildcard you could possibly consider. And last up, a Shrine to Nyx, a legendary land, so there is a strong argument that maybe you only need one of these, but it fits so nicely into any monocolor deck, be it Brawl or the very popular Explorer monocolor decks. 5 of the 6 top decks in Explorer right now are the 5 monocolor varieties, and the 6th deck out of that first 6 is basically mono white angels that has jammed in Coco. So even in something like that, this would go very, very nicely. The only time I would consider running more than one of these is something like a budget mono black devotion, where you're already kind of leaning into that devotion aspect. and maybe having more than one of these come up in a game would be potentially useful. But very, very nice, particularly as a color accelerant. I plan on crafting one there. Now, as we wrap things up, early on in this conversation, I said you definitely get value here out of that 25,000 gold because you are getting approximately 56 rare mythics, and that's way better than you could do buying packs or drafting, even in the very favorable Brothers War set. That having been said, there's a number of cards here that I am either not interested in or I'm going to have to wait and see see the build come together. Like Eldrazi Displacer, Eerie Interlude doesn't have any immediate interest for me. Clever Impersonator also, it's a fantastic card, but I don't have a deck for it at the moment. I am not a big Rack Sack or Aristocrats player, so Cutthroat is not really anywhere I'm going to be. I think for most players, the red cards that are being offered are pretty much auto-includes in your collection. But again, that's just one rare. The others are commons and uncommons and are very easy crafts. Red is just such an easy entry point and generally so successful in Explorer. And I think that's going to remain that way for quite some time. Green is a little bit more of a mixed bag. I think I said earlier, if you're looking to pick up enchantments or domain, there's definitely some cards here for you. Multicolor, Sliver Hive Lord. I'm a big Sliver player, but this isn't even the best 5-color Sliver that is now offered on Arena. I think there's already a better one. Check out my Brawl playlists. The colorless cards, while they're very easy to include in a number of Brawl decks if you're willing to splash in some wastes, these really are going to have to prove something to me before I'm interested in them. And, well, we just talked about the lands and how potentially good those are. All in all, my plan is not to buy the Anthology. And in fact, I have yet to buy any of the anthologies that they have offered, even though I very easily could make this purchase off of even my free-to-play approach. But all in all, the cards that I immediately want to add to my collection or to immediately start playing with are very easy wildcard crafts. And I believe that's the approach I'm going to take. And I strongly suggest that you give that same approach some thought. And folks, before you go, make sure you've subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on a thing. Because I know I can't change the Magic economy all by myself, but I think we can.